This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
3 civilians have been shot dead by terrorists at 3 different spots in Kashmir. All 3 terror attacks took place within an hour's time. Pakistan-backed terror has reared its ugly head again.
बड़ी खबर आ रही है जम्मू कश्मीर के कुलगाम से। कुलगाम में आतंकवादियों ने एक बार फिर से गैर कश्मीरी को निशाना बनाया है।
Terrorists continue to target innocent civilians, and in the latest incident, terrorists shot dead 2 Bihar migrant laborers in Kulgam district, and it sparked fear and panic among non-Kashmiris.
It has been a violent October in Kashmir, and you'll see it's a mix of civilian killings. Militants have been killed, army men have been killed, and the encounters are going on. Search operations are going on. Hundreds of youth have been summoned, questioned, and detained in wake of these civilian killings. So overall, the situation is grim. What we can say is the situation is on the boil, if we can say that.
October has indeed been violent and bloody in Jammu and Kashmir. As my colleague in Srinagar, Hakeem, Irfan, Rashid just mentioned, a spate of militant attacks on civilians and a widespread crackdown by security forces has left over 33 people dead in the heavily militarized region since early October. In fact, Hakeem mentioned, as we were speaking, there were encounters that have been ongoing.
As we were speaking right now, there was an encounter in Kulgam in which 2 militants were killed, and police claim that one of the militants was involved in the recent killing of 2 non-local laborers in the same area. And in another encounter earlier in the day in Shopaya, 2 militants were killed. And there is also another big operation going on in Puch, which is along the LOC in the Jammu division. So in there, the operation has entered its 10th day today, and during these 10 days, 9 army men were killed. As of now, no infiltrator has been killed. As we spoke to the spokesperson of the defense in Jammu, he said the operation is going on, and there has been reports of fresh firing. Locals in Poonch have been told not to venture in the forest area where the operation is going on.
The attacks on locals, non-Kashmiris, including migrant workers and members of the minority Hindu and Sikh communities, have made even Srinagar a fortress. More so, with VIP traffic expected in the state this week to review the grim ground situation.
यहाँ का लोगों ने तो कुछ नहीं बोला। पुलिस वाले बोलते हैं आप लोग घर से मत निकलो, बाहर मत निकलो। तो हम लोग सोचे यहाँ बैठ के क्या करेंगे, अपने घर में रहेंगे।
यहाँ लाल चौक में बेचते थे सिंघाड़ा।
आप जा रहे हो उधर?
जी सर।
क्या मसला है?
मसला यही थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम हो गया, थोड़ा सामान था उसको फेंकना पड़ा। 15-17 हज़ार का सामान था।
As the Home Ministry is scheduled to arrive, ahead of that, the security establishment has upped the ante. The frisking of civilians, public and private transport, plying on the roads is being checked regularly. And in fact, the CRPF has deployed a female contingent on the roads for the frisking of women. What a police officer who was deployed on a road told me that they have been told that there should be least number of 2-wheelers on the road so that the possibility of attacks is reduced and the risk is minimized.
Just when it seemed the political temperature was normalizing and tourism limping back, the sound of machine guns are back to haunt everyone. A stark reminder of the violent past. So what's changed now?
That is classic Kashmir to you. I mean, in Kashmir, you can have a sense of calm and peace for days, for weeks, for months, and in some cases for years. But suddenly it will take one or couple of incidents to completely change the narrative. There is this idea of Naya Kashmir in which there will be investments, tourism, IT parks. But that's where the catch is, that if this is the narrative of the government and this is what they want people to get aware about, to be aware about and to welcome, but a simple couple of incidents change this whole idea. And this idea of normalization, this idea of everything is fine, of course, is not exactly resonating on the ground. And then you see this manifests itself into different forms.
What's especially distressing after the armed forces, it is the common civilian or the hapless migrant worker from Bihar and Jharkhand, those who have come all the way from their villages to earn a simple living are being cherry-picked and shot at. Newer outfits, like the Resistance Front or TRF, dubbed as a front for Lashkar-e-Toiba, a Pakistan-based militant group, and Hizbul Mujahideen, are also mushrooming ever since the state was trifurcated and Article 370 of the Indian Constitution abolished to end the region's autonomy and removing its statehood.
Attacks on the non-locals is not the first time happening. It has happened earlier as well, which is in October 2019, immediately after the August 5, 2019 decisions. 2 months after that, we saw attacks on the non-local apple traders from Punjab who were in the South Kashmir. They were buying apples as a routine affair, but they were attacked. And I think at least 3 of them were killed. What decisions of August 5, 2019 has done, it has imbibed the fears of demographic change in the locals in Kashmir.
It's not just Kashmir. Our neighbors in the east, Bangladesh too, has suddenly seen violent attacks on Hindu minorities during this festive season. Cut to Afghanistan, and minorities within the Muslim community too have been prime targets. Middle of October, suicide bombers attacked a Shia mosque in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar, killing at least 35 people. The second week in a row that militants bombed Friday prayers and killed dozens of worshippers in a Sunni-dominated country that is now ruled by the Taliban.
Let's turn from there to Bangladesh, where the series of violent attacks on minorities have continued. Days after temples were raided and its articles were broken, reports suggested that around 90 homes were vandalized in Rangpur on Monday. The attacks have put spotlight on security of Hindus in Bangladesh.
And we begin in Afghanistan, where an explosion struck a Shia mosque during Friday prayers. It happened in the southern province of Kandahar. At least 15 people are reported dead so far, and scores are injured.
In this podcast, we dig deeper to see if these are stray incidents or part of a pattern. Has the Taliban triumph in Afghanistan inspired insurgents across South Asia? And most importantly, is that translating to a resurgent global jihad? It's 22nd of October from the Economic Times. I'm Arijit Barman. This is the Morning Brief. My colleague Dipanjan Roy has been tracking the developments in Bangladesh very closely. I asked him what triggered the recent attacks on temples and even on a Durga Puja pandal.
This is the third year of Sheikh Hasina's third term in power, and the extremists in Bangladesh are on the edge and feeling frustrated. If they can't get back to power in some way, and they have been emboldened with the incidents in Kabul, and they feel that they can push this government. And this was a perfect opportunity to, attack some of the Durga Puja pandals as well as the temple, and also create a wedge between the Hasina government in Dhaka as well as in Delhi. And they thought that they could give it a push. It is also in the context of a move that the Hasina government is making to bring back the 1970 constitution, which removes a state religion and makes secularism as a key pillar of the constitution. This was more political. The country has a history of several attacks at some point of time. One has to also see it in the context of Pakistan's, decreasing influence in Bangladesh, particularly since the BNP government is not coming to power. Their extremist partner, Jamaat-e-Islami, which is outlawed and banned by the current government, is also not being able to come to power. They are on the edge and they could take any step, and this removes religion from the constitution have actually put them on the edge.
Interestingly though, Noakhali, the epicenter of the latest round of violence, has had a history. Even in October of 1946, on the day of Lakshmi Puja, the district saw large-scale massacres of Hindu lives and property by the majority Muslim population.
The pilgrim of peace arrived in Noakhali to venture in faith. In the midst of the thick palm groves, Gandhi pitched his camp and buried himself in the devastated areas to purge the hearts of the people of hatred. The stink of death still hung over the place.
A shocked Mahatma Gandhi camped in Noakhali for 4 months to restore peace and communal harmony, but even he failed. Soon, the Congress leadership accepted the partition of India, and the peace mission and other relief camps were abandoned.
Noakhali has this history of violence streak and the riots, and Mahatma Gandhi had particularly went to Noakhali at that point of time, and this was even before the riots closer to the August 15, 1947. It has been from time to time on the edge. It's not a border district, but there are quite a few elements there who have been triggering these incidents. But Noakhali is also a district where the minority Hindi community, they are quite influential in terms of their finance. There is palpable economic prosperity that the community has in Noakhali. And there are a lot of layers in this in terms of, the local level influence and between the communities, between the trust. And it was also an attempt to target that, and there's also a counter attempt to reclaim the influence. I leave at that.
Even as Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came out strongly against the attacks and West Bengal's BJP unit looked to make it into a political issue, New Delhi has so far kept quiet.
The incidents in Komala are being thoroughly investigated. Nobody will be spared. We are getting a large amount of information. We will definitely trace those who carried out the attacks. This is the age of technology. They must be found. We did so in the past and will do it in the future too. They must face due punishment. It doesn't matter which religion they belong to. They will be hunted down and punished. Why do you consider yourself a minority? You were born on this earth. You are the children of this soil. You live with your rights.
Has not made any statement. It is unlikely that they're going to make a public statement, because the political leadership is mature here. The bureaucracy also has been quite deft in handling this issue, because anything from here will only going to weaken Sheikh Hasina in Dhaka, and that is not going to act in India's interest, not only from the viewpoint of the extremists, but also if India pushes her, then she will have no other option to quote, other powers. And the Bangladesh economy is poised for a leap now. And rather than, getting into slugfest here, the Indian businesses, they started taking advantage to try and, make further, presence or inroads into Bangladesh, which the Japanese have been doing and have been successful in the last 2 years.
As I said earlier, there's violence and victimization on both sides of our borders and within. What are we dealing with here and now? My colleagues, Pranab Dhal Samanta and Rahul Tripathi are the last words when it comes to foreign policy and internal security respectively. So it's best to rely on them to help us understand this fast-changing dynamics in the region. Rahul, let me come to you first. Is there a common thread that links the violence across our two borders in the east and the west with that of Jammu and Kashmir?
I think there is a pattern which is emerging here from the recent attacks, and you have to look things in a broader picture, not in a span of 1 or 2 months. So if you see, there were riots in Delhi also last year, just before the COVID hit us. Then suddenly you move to situation, what is happening in Afghanistan or in Bangladesh or in Kashmir. So there have been targeted killings, and not to also bring you in with the fact that how the situation is in Punjab, where Khalistan-backed terror is back and targeting civilians. So it is a very difficult situation for India. India is a big country. And also if you see disturbances in Northeast, so it is a very dynamic challenge for internal security. The emerging threats which are coming, the new kinds of threat we are encountering in terms of drones. So we have seen that how drones can be weaponized and can be used in carrying out attacks. This is happening not only on Indian, but this is happening world over.
But Pranab, I want to bring you in. I want to just understand from you that the spate of violence seems to be targeting, one is of course the armed forces, armed and paramilitary forces. But of late, it's the minorities in respective countries or areas who are being targeted more. Are they doing so because they're just easy pickings, or there is a deeper message here?
I think the key question over here is the sponsorship of these attacks. Now, India has always so far been a victim of terrorism. Now, what we see, the threat of radicalization has always been there. And like any other country with large Muslim population, there is a very small minority which is susceptible to such radicalization.
It's not your normal Taliban video. A Pakistani journalist, out of concern for his safety, wants his identity kept secret. He tells me the Pakistani Taliban gave him rare access to one of their remote training camps close to Afghanistan, where he saw them preparing for the NATO pullout over the border. A battle, he says, the Taliban think they've won.
They said we have inflicted damages on them, that's why they are withdrawing from the region. They say that is our success, that they are going with failure from the region.
And you keep monitoring them. The issue is, when does that get activated? Now, what has happened with Afghanistan is you suddenly have, for the first time, Islamic radicalized entity like the Taliban. And the worst part is, unlike Iran, this is not through some kind of uprising of the people, but through force. So it's military victory over territory. Now, the backers of Taliban reside in Pakistan, and they also feel vindicated and enjoy the success, and therefore they want to carry out an agenda. All of them have a stake in this Taliban thing, and they all see an opportunity for revival. And what you are seeing, perhaps, the easiest revival can happen in the subcontinent. It's fastest and it's easiest because the connections are there. And what you are seeing, to my mind, in Kashmir is the ISI and the other forces, anti-Indian forces, who have been vindicated in Pakistan, now training their eyes on India. So you see the rise of ISI and its other Pakistan army generals who might want to now put another Kashmir-like agenda, because that's also important. That always serves them well when Pakistan is in turmoil. And similarly in Bangladesh, where Pakistan has a problem, or the ISI has always had a problem with it, to use the Islamic radicalization card. So the big guessing game which is going on in Afghanistan, if you go and talk to any Western scholar, is when is IS or Al-Qaeda going to take over from the Taliban leadership in Kabul? So this game is a dangerous game. What direction it eventually takes, we don't know. Whether it will lead to riots on the street, more targeting of mass minorities, things like that, we can't say, because these things evolve. The cycle of violence evolves rather rapidly, and often the person who starts it cannot control it. This lid has been opened. And with the Taliban there, and with them having control of a state, a territory, ISI controlling so much of that area, the Americans out, no pressure, I think they've backed themselves to now fuel this and take this further. They feel their time has come. They were subdued politically for the last 7-8 years. I think they feel the time to rise has come again.
Yeah. And as you said, despite the common origin and faith, there are various factions. If I'm not mistaken, the only execution the Taliban have admitted since taking over Kabul 2 months back was that of Abu Omar Khorsani, the leader Al-Qaeda. So that makes it even more difficult to spot the enemy, so to speak.
You're absolutely correct, Arijit, because the low cost of terror is such that any 5 people who have the ability and the imagination to plan something like this can actually make an impact very quickly. It can be an execution. So the important thing for us is to realize that the people who gain from this agenda, their tails are up. So the problem is at the source point. So if the sponsors are back, they will find ways and means to do it. So now how do you ring fence those sponsors all over again? That's a tough task.
What I would like to add here is that the challenge for India and for the world comes from social media.
Meanwhile, NIA sources have told India today that ISIS handler Rashid created 2 WhatsApp groups to indoctrinate youngsters. The groups were named Message to Kerala and Message to Kerala 66. Around 200 people were added to each of these groups, and most of the text messages as well as audio clips were about joining the war for ISIS.
If you see these WhatsApp, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, so even one post is sufficient to spark any riots or communal tension within minutes.
That's true. I mean, the conventional means are now joined by the non-conventional means, and technology plays a big part. Drone, I guess, is also part of that. Does the security establishment or the intelligence establishment in India look at it as, is it just a coincidence that the degree and the spate of killings going up post the Taliban government coming to power 2 months back?
If you look at the data of previous years, terrorism has been at its peak, and what we are seeing is nothing. If you look at this year, I think maybe less than 30 civilians have been killed, and we are already in October. So if you look at 2019, 2018, 2017, so the number of civilians killed were higher. But yeah, this has an alarming effect because most of these civilians have been targeted this year, this time when these killings have happened, whether it was a non-local or a local, they have been targeted. And actually, if you look at 2019, when 370 was removed, immediately after there was a clampdown of internet, there was restriction in terms of if you couldn't move out, and everybody was rounded up. And then came 2020, which was a COVID year. So there was not much of a movement, not much of an activity. So this 2021 has given a way of expressing, also allowed the hand for Pakistan to play in Kashmir, emboldened by the situation in Afghanistan where US troops have withdrawn. So all that has played in favor of this. There were intelligence reports that the temples in Jammu could be targeted during August 15, and maybe they try to disrupt August 15 in Srinagar as well. But that didn't happen. But it was all there. So it is slowly playing out.
India, therefore, does not have much choice but to engage with Kabul. It's been 2 months and there is no other alternative left with us but to sit down and talk.
Before we get too carried away with this, please understand this is all happening a bit in tango, in the sense that there is a distinction being drawn between acknowledging or recognizing Taliban and reaching humanitarian aid. The problem with the current Taliban leadership is most of them are proscribed entities, and they are living on exemptions which are being granted by certain committees in the UNSC. Those exemptions are for periods of 3 months. So they want those exemptions, they want to be removed from those lists, not be on this permanent exemption thing. So that's the first step towards recognition. Without that happening, the Taliban leader Mullah Baradar and others find themselves in a very difficult spot. They have been conveying that if you don't recognize us, we will be taken over by a more radical leadership. That's the bargaining chip. So in that light, the international community is bargaining for somehow reaching humanitarian assistance, telling them to assist the world in reaching humanitarian assistance, and then we will see the steps to recognition. In that backdrop, engaging with Taliban will happen only from a point of view of reaching humanitarian assistance. The issue for India is, and it has always been, that to what extent will Pakistan cooperate in allowing Indian assistance to reach Afghanistan? I sincerely doubt there is any expectation over here that the Taliban will cooperate in getting terrorist outfits inimical to India to act on them, because they are controlled by the same motherboard in Pakistan. It's very difficult for Taliban to influence that. How does India respond? And that's the issue, because when we have a full majority nationalist government in Delhi. This is not a coalition government.
प्रस्तावित करने का काम किया और मैं मानता हूं एक युगांतकारी शुरुआत की है उन्होंने। एक युग था जब बातों से बात होती थी और दूसरा युग आया कि जैसा सामने से सवाल आएगा ऐसा ही जवाब दिया जाएगा। मित्रों, इसमें भारत को देखने का नजरिया बदला है।
If you look at the late 90s, whole of 2000s, India tolerated a lot. All right, we faced several terror attacks, but India did not respond militarily or otherwise. Here, that is a problem. This government, I don't think, can be seen as not responding. And we've seen this with Uri also. And that was, by the way, to use an attack on an army camp. All right. So what happens if there's an attack on civilians of any large nature? So till now, you've been able to preempt or prevent, but one may slip through. Then how do you respond? I think that's $1 million question.
But Rahul, from an internal security prism, it seems that our forces are stretched to the full. You have an unpredictable China and the Chinese threat in our borders, and they're upping their ante. That's on one side. Compounded further by, as you said, the reopening of old fault lines, Punjab, pockets of Northeast. It's really attack or siege from all sides.
Yeah, India is facing challenges from multiple forums, especially internal issues are now international. What you did in Jammu and Kashmir and what this government wanted to bring through CA legislation has snowballed into a different kind of controversy. And despite their best attempt, they have not been able to implement Citizenship Amendment Act. So yes, all these has created contradiction. And now with Afghanistan opening up, already our borders are saturated. They are now looking at a different problem of narcotics, smuggling of weapons, and whole range of issues which are cropping. So they are asking for that we should have manpower to handle.
So if you could just help us understand that how much, like if there's an estimate that all forces put together, there is still a shortfall of say 10,000 or 20,000 in the end. If you could give some data point, if you have it readily available.
CRPF, one of the paramilitary forces which is engaged in counter-terror duties in Kashmir, as well as they are doing this internal security duties in Maoist areas where they are the lead force. At the same time, they are also engaged in law and order issues wherever it is, whether it is most of the states seek central forces to maintain law and order. At the same time, whenever there is an election, CRPF is the lead agency which is supposed to coordinate. And to put together all of this, the number of forces that we have, central forces, it is around 10 lakh plus, which includes BSF, CRPF, ITBP, SSP and everybody. All state police combined, all security forces combined, paramilitary combined. The forces are around
1.3 billion almost. Yeah.
Yes. And we India is a big country, so it becomes really difficult to police.
Interesting. Now, coming back to Kashmir, Pranab, the recent spate of killings, is it all about abrogation of Article 370, or there is a deeper fear that many would argue the demographics in the state will get altered?
The abrogation of Article 370 was a political decision taken at Delhi. Now, point is, what you're trying to do is align Jammu and Kashmir to just like any other state, or in this case UT, in the rest of India. Commitment, and that was something which was articulated by the Prime Minister even in the last Independence Day speech, that we want to hold elections in Jammu and Kashmir. The democratic process has to move forward. So if that doesn't move forward, what you will then have a whole identity business of Kashmiri identities. They deserve to have their own government. They deserve to have their own assembly, everything. You've done the panchayat elections, you've done the municipal elections, the local body elections. And therefore, that transfer of power must take place quickly. Otherwise, the questions which you raise, even before marginalizing of communities happens, Arijit, the perception builds up before in today's day and age.
UN Council Resolution number 47 of 1948, Article 2 of the Geneva Convention and Article 370 of the Indian Constitution बस एक सवाल उठाता है सिर्फ एक हैदर हम हैं कि हम नहीं हम हैं तो कहाँ हैं और नहीं है तो कहाँ गए हम हैं तो किस लिए और कहाँ गए तो कब छना हम थे भी कि हम थे ही नहीं
And that itself breeds its own insecurity, and which is partly what we are seeing in Kashmir at the moment. And then you become a rumor mill, which has happened in Kashmir in the past. And it is very important that the government realizes that it needs to move fast on the political process. It needs to transfer power to the local people in some form or the other. We can't have lieutenant governors from outside the state running the state for a large length of time. We've seen what that does in Kashmir. And then you have bureaucrats who are not essentially from the Jammu and Kashmir cadre. They come and then they develop their own constituencies, their own people. That is really harmful. It is incumbent, I would say, on the government to take the political process to its logical end sooner rather than later. You have to have Kashmiris decide their own future at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Pranab, if we look at the other side, Bangladesh, many commentators would say that it's just a political ploy. It is not anything to do with just to destabilize Hasina government.
Go along with that view for the moment. I don't think there is, you can write off extremism has always been there, and extremist forces and parties have always held sway. So there is a political constituency which is right-of-wing extremists. But the Sheikh Hasina nationalist narrative has held. Bangladesh has also done well to some extent economically. And that has also helped her. Now, you would know this better, it is going to move out of its LDC status pretty soon. And then you have other realities which will hit you, and there it needs support from India. So it's a good equation which is going on, and the only way to destabilize it is through violence from the right. And I think that would be expected to basically expose the political fissure they are trying to attack, is expose Hasina's collaboration with the Hindu majority government in Delhi. I think that will not, but I don't know whether that will have that much political resonance given what Sheikh Hasina enjoys.
And you see a resurgence of the deep state or non-state actors in Pakistan, more so because the Imran Khan government is on a weak wicket. So in that backdrop, is it time therefore to review our ceasefire? Because Kashmir also we are seeing spate of violence.
I think there is a big debate which is already on within the Indian security establishment that whether the ceasefire was just a ploy so that they could concentrate more on Afghanistan at that point. And to answer specifically to your question, I think most of the Indian security establishment is pretty clear that the ceasefire, ab naam ke vaste, it is now hogwash. They cannot work with the assumption that there is a ceasefire and hence certain things won't happen. They are happening and more will happen.
Add to that, it's not just the military might of China, but their money power, their financial muscle. That makes it doubly hard to perhaps combat the threats?
See, the biggest issue over here is what I think you're referring to is the China-Pak collaboration. The regime over there, their ability to stomach casualties and reversals appears to be limited. China has to always be a success story. And if there are reversals, it's very difficult for China to accept it, to be able to tell its people that things didn't work. Now, so the margin of error is very less for a Chinese government. So it appears, and we are seeing it even on the economic front. Given that, it's even to accept one or two casualties in the Galwan clash, it took them so much time. So in that scenario, while China brings to bear a lot of economic muscle and prowess. Their ability to back a sustained military conflict, I think it's not been done. We have to see, but it will test Chinese politics. These are tough calls, and we'll have to see where that goes. The political will, I think, will be tested.
Bad government creates an opening for jihadism. When a state is unfair, its citizens tend to conceive that the one run by jihadists might be better. Even if they do not take up arms themselves, they may quietly support those who do. Many rural Afghans decided that Taliban justice, although harsh, was quicker, less plunderous, and less corrupt than government courts. This is one reason the Taliban's final march to power in Kabul 2 months back met so little resistance. The main ripple effects of Afghanistan across South Asia and the world will be psychological. The Taliban triumph will fire up jihadists in other countries and spur recruits to join them. This is where outreach or empowering the locals will be key. Break the perception, as Pranab mentioned in the episode. For India, this is no easy task. The unpredictability of the Chinese threat in our borders, a hostile Pakistan and its non-state actors upping their ante, compounded further by the reopening of old fault lines in the northeast and Punjab, makes it that much more challenging. But as Hakeem rightly said, that's where New Delhi must step in and soothe frayed nerves. Constructive, inclusive dialogue with the people in the valley, their political representatives, or the agitating farmers of Uttar Pradesh and Punjab is a must to mitigate risks and minimize the growing Khalistani influence. A pure military approach to fighting jihadism does little to make the ground less fertile for it. The long-term solution is to build less awful, less exclusive states. Unless New Delhi and other governments in the region provide basic services and something resembling justice, the jihadist siren will always sound seductive. I'm Arijit Burman and you've been listening to The Morning Brief. Thank you Hakeem, Dipanjan, Rahul and Pranab. Deeply appreciated. This episode was edited and coordinated by Bhavya Dilip Kumar. Music by Saundarya Jayachandran. Edits by Rushabh Manglurkar and produced by Swati Joshi. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. We look forward to your feedback. Write to us at themorningbrief@timesgroup.com. And if you like this episode, please share on your social media handles. We'll really appreciate it. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursdays and Friday. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. Goodbye and good luck. All edited sound clips used in this episode belongs to their respective owners. Credits mentioned in the description.